Roll for Crit is made possible thanks to the support of viewers like you and our patrons on our Patreon page.
You can become a patron for just $1 a month at patreon.com/rollforcrit. Today on Roll for Crit, we review the board game Flourish, which is on Kickstarter right now from Starling Games with its Signature Edition, which includes a fancy box and some extra expansions in it. It's a drafting game about building the very best, most beautiful garden that you can build and ultimately getting more points than any of your opponents.
Flourish is all about trying to draft your perfect garden while not helping out your neighbors too much. Each game is consisted of 4 rounds, which each round consisting of 3 turns. Each turn, you're going to take one card from your hand and place it face down. It's going to be the card you're gonna play. Now, after that, you can choose 2 other cards in your hand and pass them to the neighbor on your left and right. You're going to put this over a little wall they have, but more or less you're going to give it to them. After everyone has done this, each player should be receiving 2 cards as well as giving away 2 cards, along with the face down card in front of them. They will flip it over, take the 2 cards that they gained from their neighbors, as well as draw a new card from the deck. So no matter what, you should always have 6 cards at the start of each turn. After 3 turns, that round has ended. You're then going to take a look at your cards. There are multiple symbols on your cards, but this is what you need to know. Over here is the symbols the cards provides. Usually it's some kind of flower symbol. There may be a stone symbol down here that is sort of a feature of your garden, so like a fountain or a lawn. In the upper corner here is where you'll have end of round scoring. These trigger at the end of the round that they're played and only that round. So for example, if you have a card that gives you points for every rose you have at the end of the round, it only looks during the end of that round for roses. So if you played more roses later on, it isn't going to help. Down here in the corners for end of game after you've played all 4 rounds. You'll repeat this process for 3 rounds and then change things up in that 4th one.
In the 4th and final round, you won't draw a new card from the deck, and the biggest change is that rather than playing your cards one at a time and then passing cards and getting new ones in between, you're going to be playing all 3 of your cards for that round face down, and then all players will reveal all 3 of them simultaneously. So you're not going to have as many options to play with, but you also don't have to worry about other players seeing what kinds of cards you have and what they might want to give you, and you don't have to think about what may or may not be given to you later on. You're just going to have what you have, and you're going to be able to play them all right away, so it's going to be a quick round. Then you take a look at the end of game scoring, again in that bottom right corner, and these will give you one final bonus for each one that you have. Could be for more symbols on your cards, could be for the stones, could even look at things that your neighbors have in their gardens, or perhaps just one of your neighbors. And then you are going to calculate your final score and see who has the highest total, and that player, of course, is the winner. So it's called Flourish, and it's a very simple game. It's a pretty straightforward drafting thing as we've just laid out, and it's all about looking at those symbols and trying to decide, what do I want to go for? Do I want roses or maybe mushrooms? And also worrying, well, if I start putting down mushrooms early on, will my neighbors see that and then they aren't going to give me any of the mushroom cards that I need? Maybe I'll save that for my 2nd and 3rd cards and hope that they pass me some stuff so I can be sneakier about it later on. So you're not just looking at your own garden. You really do have to pay attention to what other players are doing as well.
And of course, there are other game modes to help spice things up. You can actually play cooperatively, in which you'll actually add your score up at the end and compare it to a table on the back to see if you made bronze, silver, or gold. There's also a ribbon version in which each person will be dealt out some ribbons in the beginning randomly. They'll have either a feature on it or another symbol, and you'll play 3 simultaneous games, and your goal is to have the most of whatever's on your ribbon for a game. If you do, you flip it over and it gives you 7 points, so it's pretty much more like a marathon version of the game. There's also a solo mode where you'll play against an AI, which is similar. The idea pretty much being you're going to pass cards to a deck of a certain number of cards, and he's going to shuffle the deck and randomly play a card each time. So it's a bit more of a random version of playing the 2-player game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, most games, if you think they have a competitive and a cooperative version, that sounds like something that might not work, because usually those are 2 diametrically opposed things you have to design around. But in this instance, I think both of those modes work equally well. Obviously the way we explained it for competitive, you're checking out your opponent's gardens, you're trying to play the right cards and not give them what they need. And then for cooperative, it works the opposite way. You're not allowed to discuss what's in your hands, but instead you're looking around and now you're saying, oh, they want roses. Well, I'm going to try to give them those roses. And that can be also just as fun, if not more so, I think, to see by working together how high your scores can go, because they can be a lot higher because now you're no longer throttling each other. You're playing at your maximum capacity.
It actually reminds me a little bit like Space Alert, where you sort of have to read what the other players are doing at the table. So you're like, all right, I'm going to, like, because you can't say what's in my hand, so I'm not going to be able to play this card this turn, but I'm going to give you this blue flower card, so you should know I don't need this. Something like that. And it can become pretty funny where you're like, oh, you played the card I wanted you to give it back to me. Something weird like that. And the competitive mode is, I mean, it's a drafting game, so I'm going to compare it to Seven Wonders and still gets that feeling of looking and to be like, all right, what are my neighbors are doing? Oh, I don't have to worry about Jonathan. He's across the table from me right now. So, oh, he doesn't like mushrooms. Yeah, I'll give him the mushroom card. Then he'll have to decide if he's going to give it back to me or Jonathan, who is building up mushrooms, So some more interesting tactics like that. And it's relatively quick.
Yes, very quick. The game lasts you like 15, 20 minutes usually. And like Seven Wonders, it accommodates a large number of players, and it scales very well, whether you're playing with solo mode or all the way up to 7. It should be noted as a caveat, we are living in turbulent times right now. So, we weren't able to experience those larger, higher player counts, but pretty much you're mostly focused on just your two neighbors, and you're like Seven Wonders, you're usually kind of relying on players at the other end of the table like to deal with their stuff anyway. So the experience, I think, is more or less the same, although I do think that ultimately playing with like 5 to 7 probably is how you want to play this. Maybe not though. I think both, either way, could be still fun.
We did play the most obviously of 2-player because that's always the easiest thing for us, especially in these times. And it did sort of feel like the way because you're passing both your cards because your neighbor on your left and right is the other player, to the same person, you start to get a feeling of what cards are available and what they don't want really fast. So it's a lot easier to, I almost feel like it's not really strangleholding, but you're sort of just passing the same cards back and forth if neither player wants them.
Sometimes, yeah. There's definitely not as many other variables thrown into the mix. I still thought it worked pretty well, but yeah, I think like you like 3 or 4 you really want to get the ideal experience, I think.
I would say it's one of those things where like it works, but I would highly suggest you go for more.
But co-op worked great 2-player.
Oh yeah, co-op is fantastic in 2-player.
And it's Starling Games, so pretty much all their games look beautiful. It's got really nice art. It's a garden. Even the little walls are, although they're completely unnecessary, they're nice that they're in there. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's right. They're cardboard minis. So it's it's very simple. It's a very simple game, but it's effective. If you're like kind of a light drafting game, it fits the bill.
Crits and misses for Flourish.
Crits. It's not enough to just focus on your own garden. The game keeps you engaged with what other players are doing and makes you be mindful of what cards you're passing or playing.
Drafting is all about making sure you get the cards you want while your opponents don't get what they need. And the simple tweaks they add here make sure that you're able to keep track of all that without things getting too complicated.
Different cards will have different options for rewards at the end of a round or at the end of the entire game. So you can plan for the short term or the long term, which makes different cards feel exciting and might be advantageous or put you at a disadvantage depending on when you play them.
The cards are versatile, being used for end of round or end of game, or even providing the symbols so you can actually score points. You're going to have to weigh the short-term rewards versus the long-term rewards in this one.
It's a simple, straightforward game, but there are plenty of modes to choose from, including competitive and cooperative, plus support for a solo player all the way up to 7.
It's nice that the game can fit 2 to 7, but even though the competitive was only all right with 2 players, the cooperative was fantastic, so I really think this should be fine regardless of how many players you can get to the table. Misses. It's a quick, light, fun game, but honestly, it feels a little overproduced because it's a Kickstarter game. The walls probably aren't really necessary, and the score checkers, which are very nice, but could easily be replaced with just some pen and paper.
This is a game that will look nice on your table and attract people to see what you are playing, but if you already have a lot of games on your shelf, you're going to have to make room for what could have fit into a smaller package.
We have the Signature Edition here, which included 2 mini expansions. I guess you can call them mini, but if you actually look at the box here, they take up a lot of the room of it. It's these structures, which are really cool, actually, because it has you actually worry about how you lay out your cards in sort of a grid format. So it definitely adds some things. There's also a small deck of animal cards to give you more points or stuff, but I mean, I just want the animals. I don't care about how they're going to help me. I just want to have the pet snake. Regardless, though, I do think you're talking about the Mist really just is that. It's these buildings that and the walls. It's like you could have put this in a smaller box. We think mechanically it's actually pretty great. The different game modes are interesting and they actually help solve the problems that the player counts. The solo mode, which I played a bit, was actually pretty fun. It's not a bad game. It's just a little annoying in terms of shelf space, especially for us who, there's only so much space we have.
And even that, I mean, really, I struggled to come up with truly any complaints about this game. Not that it's like the best game ever, but there's just not really anything wrong with it. It is what it is. It's simple. It doesn't try to do more than it needs to. It, again, works for large groups of people, works in different ways. It gets in, gets out quick. It's fun. It's satisfying. It's a really strong game if you want a light drafting game that will accommodate a different numbers of people. It's kind of hard to go wrong with this, and it's unusual. Usually when a game's on Kickstarter, we just do a preview for it, but in this instance, they do have this finalized special edition of the game, which will be available later on through their stores online and at conventions only. So you'll be able to pick it up after the fact, but it's complete right now, and it's hard not to recommend it if you're into that style of game.
I actually think this is a good idea if you knew someone who might like Seven Wonders maybe, but wasn't crazy about the theme, because it still, I think, does drafting very well. It's one of the reasons why I like Seven Wonders, is because drafting is, I think, a great mechanic.
Or if maybe that's too complicated for someone too. This is definitely simpler than Seven Wonders, I think.
I still think it has a bite to it. There's a lot of symbols, and weighing out that short term versus long term is actually really fun, because you're like, oh, I want to play this now for that round bonus, but like, I don't know if it'd be that good. And then I'm signaling, as you said, to everyone that I'm looking for this. Mm-hmm. So it's by no means like too simple of a game. I don't want to try to like put it that like as a low ball between Seven Wonders. To me, it's pretty close.
That's fair.
Base game wise,
Simple in rules, but there's depth to trying to figure everything out. And there are a lot of cards, so you will see a good amount of variety, I think, when you play. There have to be a lot of cards because with 7 players, you're going to be using a lot of them. It also made me think of another drafting game, Tides of Time from Portal Games, which is strictly a 2-player game, but a similar kind of thing where you have to figure out, what is my opponent doing, which cards do I give them or not. But with this game, a much larger pool of cards again, so there is a lot of variety in between each game too. Something else worth noting.
Let us know what your thoughts about Flourish are, and whether you're backing the Kickstarter or if some time has passed and you've picked up the game or received your copy from Kickstarter. If you think this is a fun, interesting take on drafting, or is it more of the same old, you can let us know in those comments down below.
Yeah, and let us know if you prefer co-op or competitive, or what your high scores are if you've played it so far. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
And this was Roll for Crit.
We want you to like and subscribe, and if you have the chance, take a look at our Patreon.
Thank you for being a friend. Subscribe to our channel and back again. Okay.